How does a scholarly English monk find the courage to walk unarmed into lands ruled by pagan warlords? What kind of faith can transform early medieval Germanic warriors into builders of civilization? Why did Willibrord risk everything, including martyrdom, to challenge sacred pagan shrines and publicly defy their taboos that entire kingdoms feared to approach? This is the story of Saint Willibrord, the often forgotten apostle who brought the light of Christ to the dark forests of the north and helped lay the foundations for the Christian nations of the north. What kind of faith makes a man walk unarmed into lands ruled by pagan warlords? If history hides courage greater than legend, this is where it begins. Hit like and subscribe for more forgotten journeys that shaped the world. The year was 658, and in the windswept hills of Northumbria, a child was born into a world still learning Christ's name. His own grandparents had worshipped Thor and Wodan. The stone crosses rising across England were barely a generation old. The land still remembered the old gods, their sacred groves, their blood-soaked altars. Yet here, in this recently pagan kingdom, monasteries now dotted the countryside like candles lit against the northern darkness. At Ripon, young Willibrord entered a world of wonder. Stone cells echoed with Latin chant. Manuscripts glowed with gold and crimson under lamplight. Monks bent over pages, copying scripture in careful hands. The air smelled of incense and ink, of beeswax and bread. Here, he learned the Psalms, the liturgy, the theology that would become the foundation of everything. His teacher, Saint Wilfrid, had himself traveled to Rome and brought back the ordered beauty of the universal church. But at 20, Willibrord felt a pull toward something deeper. Ireland called. That green island of saints and scholars where monasteries rose like cities of prayer. He left Northumbria for Ireland and studied under Saint Egbert at Rathmelsigi for about 12 years. 12 years of cold dawns and colder cells, of fasting and vigil, of manuscripts and meditation. Ireland taught him that holiness required more than learning. It demanded the stripping away of self until only God remained. During those long years, a vision crystallized in his heart. Egbert himself had longed to evangelize the pagans across the sea, but had been held back by divine signs. Now that the torch has passed to younger hands, Willibrord looked north and east, toward the wild coastal lands of Frisia, where Germanic tribes still sacrificed to the old gods. His own people had been just like them, barbarians, pagans, lost in darkness, until someone had brought them the light. At 32, newly ordained, he began gathering companions. 11 men were willing to leave everything, to risk everything, for people who had never heard Christ's name. They prepared themselves through prayer, knowing that where they journeyed, martyrdom was more likely than success. He had spent years preparing his soul. Now it was time to risk his life. The North Sea thrashed their small vessel as 12 monks sailed toward the unknown in 690. Beyond the gray horizon lay Frisia, the flat, marshy coastlands where the Rhine met the ocean, where fierce warriors controlled the trade routes between Britain and the continent. The Frisians were renowned throughout Europe, bold sailors, cunning merchants, and devoted servants of the old gods. When Willibrord first stepped onto Frisian soil, he entered a world utterly alien to everything he knew. Sacred groves loomed dark with mystery. Springs bubbled forth offerings to fertility goddesses. Warriors wore amulets of Thor's hammer and swore oaths by Wodan's spear. Some sources suggest that older rites, possibly including human sacrifice in earlier times, lingered in memory and fear. This was not the ordered world of monasteries and liturgy. This was chaos, seeking gods who promised only blood and battle. King Radbod ruled the Frisians with an iron hand, suspicious of the Christian Franks who pressed his borders. To him, Christianity meant not salvation, but subjugation, a weapon of Frankish imperialism. When he heard of monks preaching a foreign god, his eyes narrowed with contempt. But Willibrord possessed more than courage. He had wisdom. Rather than confronting Radbod directly, He traveled south to meet Pepin of Herstal, the Frankish ruler whose Christian armies had carved out territories in southern Frisia. An alliance was struck. Pepin would provide protection, allowing the missionaries to work in the contested borderlands where Frankish influence balanced Frisian power. Slowly, carefully, Willibrord began. He learned the harsh Germanic tongue. He studied their customs, their fears, their hopes. He started not with kings but with slaves, those who had nothing to lose and everything to gain from a God who called them beloved. Small baptisms in hidden places. A handful of converts taking enormous risks, knowing their families might disown them, their neighbors might kill them. Each new Christian became a living witness that the old gods had no power over those who belonged to Christ. The missionaries established simple churches, wooden structures that stood fragile and defiant in pagan territory. They offered not just doctrine, but mercy, caring for the sick, feeding the hungry, and teaching children to read. But converts without organization would scatter like sheep. Willibrord needed authority, and he knew where to find it. He first sought Roman support in 692, traveling south through hostile territories, over mountain passes, across rivers swollen with spring melt, until he reached Rome itself. The eternal city rose before him, its ancient stones bearing witness to martyrs and emperors, to the blood of Peter and Paul. Pope Sergius I received the English monk with astonishment and joy. Here was a missionary from the edge of the world seeking not gold or favor but only authorization to preach Christ to pagans. They spoke of Frisia, of the challenges, of the souls waiting in darkness. In 695, Pope Sergius I consecrated him Archbishop of Utrecht and gave him the pallium, a symbol of papal authority placed upon his shoulders. He was given a new name, Clement, after the early pope who had written Hope from Exile. Relics blessed by the successor of Peter filled his traveling cases. Books, vestments, sacred vessels, everything needed to build not just churches but a diocese. Returning to Frisia with enhanced authority transformed everything. Now Willibrord could ordain priests, consecrate churches, and organize the scattered converts into a structured community. Utrecht became his episcopal seat, a beacon rising in the marshlands. Monasteries began to multiply. Native Frisians trained for the priesthood, carrying the gospel to their own people in their own tongue. But just as the mission blossomed, catastrophe struck. In 714, Pepin of Herstal died. Frankish power collapsed into civil war. The protective shield vanished. Radbod, seizing his moment, swept through the Christian territories like a storm. Churches burned. Priests fled or died. Years of patient work crumbled into ashes. Willibrord faced his darkest hour with remarkable patience. He did not rage or despair. Instead, he retreated to safer territories, gathered his scattered flock, and waited. He prayed. He rebuilt what he could. He trusted that God's timing would prevail over human politics. In 719, Radbod died. The door, once slammed shut, creaked open again. The mission had survived its darkest hour. Now came its most audacious moment. According to later missionary accounts, one of the most dramatic episodes occurred in the years before Radbod's death. Heligoland rose from the North Sea like a fortress of stone, wrapped in mist and legend. The Frisians called it Fosite's land, holy to the god Fosite, whose sacred spring bubbled with divine power. Strict taboos governed the island. No violence, no speaking above a whisper, no taking anything, not even water, from the spring. Those who violated these laws died swiftly, struck down by the god's wrath or by human enforcers of the sacred order. Willibrord, tradition tells us, made a deliberate decision that would become the most famous moment of his life. He would sail to Heligoland and challenge the shrine. Not from recklessness, but from calculated spiritual warfare. Paganism's power rested on fear. Fear that the gods would strike. That violation meant death. That the old order could not be challenged. His companions rowed across gray waters toward the island. Local Frisians watched in horror as the monks approached the forbidden shore. "The god will kill you," they warned. "No one defies Fawcett and lives." Willibrord walked calmly to the sacred spring. In the silence that should have been reverential, he proclaimed the words that would echo through history. "Christ has conquered. Christ is King. Christ is Lord of all." Then he baptized converts in the pagan spring. He is said to have drunk from the forbidden water and to have slaughtered animals held sacred to Fawcett, feeding them to his men. Nothing happened. No lightning struck. No invisible hand threw him down. The god remained silent because the god was powerless, an empty name, a lie that had held people captive for generations. But human vengeance came swiftly. King Radbod summoned Willibrord to his hall. Everyone expected execution. The sacrilege could not go unpunished. For 3 days, the king cast lots, a pagan ritual to determine which of Willibrord's companions would die for the offense. Willibrord watched as, one by one, his brothers were spared, until the lot fell on a single monk. One companion was executed, remembered as a martyr of the mission, while Willibrord stood helpless. The grief cut deeper than any blade. Yet, even in death, victory emerged. Radbod, staring at Willibrord, spoke words heavy with reluctant awe. "Your God protects you." He had defied the gods and lived. Now he would build on ground soaked with both pagan blood and Christian witness. After Radbod died in 719, Willibrord entered the most fruitful period of his extraordinary mission. With political obstacles removed and his spiritual authority proven, he became not just a preacher, but an architect of civilization. Churches rose across the Frisian landscape, not wooden huts now, but stone buildings that proclaimed permanence. Each foundation laid became a declaration. Christ's kingdom would outlast the kingdoms of men. Echternach, founded in 698, became his base, monastery, scriptorium, and training house for native clergy. This abbey in Luxembourg grew into a major center of learning, where manuscripts were copied in exquisite detail, where Frisian boys learned Latin and theology, where the wisdom of Christian centuries was preserved and transmitted. The scriptorium's candles burned late into northern nights as monks transcribed scripture, patristic writings, and liturgical texts. But Willibrord understood something profound. Destroying paganism was not enough. Christianity had to replace it with beauty, more compelling than what had been lost. Where pagan drums had beaten, church bells now rang. Where blood had stained altars, bread and wine became Christ's body. Where warriors had sought glory through violence, monks taught that true strength served the weak. He trained native clergy, refusing to create a church dependent on foreign missionaries. Frisian priests brought the gospel to Frisian hearts in words that resonated with their own culture. The liturgy was Roman in structure, but adapted in expression. Pagan festivals were transformed, harvest celebrations became Thanksgiving feasts, and spring rites were baptized into Easter joy. Monasteries became centers of agricultural innovation, teaching advanced farming techniques that increased harvests and eased hunger. Schools attached to churches offered education to children, regardless of rank. Justice shifted from revenge to mercy, from tribal honor codes to Christian concepts of human dignity. The transformation rippled outward, economic, social, cultural, far beyond what anyone had imagined. Willibrord's unique charism combined patience with boldness. He knew conversion was generational, that planting seeds mattered more than immediate harvests. He confronted evil directly when necessary, but built beauty constantly. He destroyed idols, but raised cathedrals. He wept for the martyred, but rejoiced in the baptized. He had built a church that would outlast him. Now, in his final years, he would see the fruit of his lifetime of labor. By the 732nd, Willibrord had become a living legend, the patriarch whose beard had turned white in service, whose eyes had witnessed the transformation of nations. Frisia, once completely pagan, now echoed with Christian prayer. Churches stood in villages that had known only blood sacrifice. Children sang psalms their grandparents could never have imagined. Young missionaries sought him out, drawn by his reputation. Among them came a Saxon monk named Boniface, who would later become the Apostle of Germany. Watching Willibrord work, learning his methods, understanding his patience, Boniface absorbed lessons that would shape his own mission. The torch was passing to a new generation. In his late 70s, Willibrord returned to Echternach. After decades as archbishop, administrator, and builder of institutions, he became again what he had always been at heart, a simple monk. He prayed in the chapel he had founded. He walked the cloister paths worn smooth by countless feet. He guided younger brothers with gentle wisdom earned through 50 years of missionary labor. On Nov.7, 739, at the age of 81, Willibrord closed his eyes for the last time. He died surrounded by his spiritual children, in the abbey that was his greatest earthly achievement, having given more than half a century to bringing Christ to the north. His passing was peaceful. No drama, no final miracles, only the quiet exhale of a soul returning home. But death was not the end. His tomb at Echternach immediately became a pilgrimage site. Miracles were reported. Healings, protections, answers to prayer. More importantly, his legacy unfolded across generations. The Low Countries, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg became heartlands of Christian civilization. Cities and churches across the region bear his name. The nations he evangelized call him their spiritual father. Most remarkably, the Echternach dancing procession, begun shortly after his death, continues unbroken for 13 centuries. Every Tuesday after Pentecost, thousands of pilgrims dance through the streets in his honor, a living tradition connecting past and present, a witness that what Willibrord planted still blooms. The monk who changed nations rests in a simple tomb, but the light he carried into darkness burns still. Willibrord transformed Northern Europe, not through violence, but through patient witness, not through imposing faith, but through living it so radiantly that others desired what he possessed. The Netherlands, once fierce in paganism, became a center of Christian culture. Echternach Abbey preserved learning through the Dark Ages. His methods influenced generations of missionaries who carried the gospel further north and east. Today, as post-Christian Europe returns to new forms of paganism, Willibrord's story speaks with urgent relevance. He shows us that cultural transformation is possible, but requires patience measured in decades, not days. That confronting idolatry, whether literal or metaphorical, demands both courage and wisdom. The building's beauty matters as much as denouncing darkness. That one generation plants seeds, another generation harvests. For believers facing hostile environments, for missionaries in secular or never-Christian contexts, for anyone discouraged by slow progress, Willibrord offers hope. He spent 50 years building what we now take for granted. He endured setbacks that would have crushed lesser souls. He buried martyrs and baptized converts, destroyed shrines and raised cathedrals, knowing that faithfulness mattered more than immediate success. The monk who walked unarmed into pagan darkness, who drank from forbidden springs, who trained priests and copied manuscripts, who lived to see the fruit of his labors, reminds us that patient courage changes civilizations. That what seems impossible today can become inevitable tomorrow. That light, however small, always overcomes darkness when carried faithfully forward. From Northumbria to Ireland to Frisia, Willibrord carried the flame of faith into lands that had never known its warmth. He lit fires that still burn 13 centuries later. And in the dancing procession at Echternach, in the churches that bear his name, in the nations that call him Father, the often forgotten apostle remains unforgotten, his mission eternal, his witness alive.